I didn't remember any talking at the end. That's funny.
I think that the audio must have been from the music video,
Right.
Because there's because it's like a live set.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah. We were really playing. We had amps and stuff there.
Yeah.
Totally. Wow.
Well, with that said, Sean Hurley, you're here, Queen of California,
Right
born and
on,
raised.
brother.
Thank you so much, man. This is incredible.
Thanks for bringing me in, Mason.
Yeah. So we're here, beautiful Canyon Studios, Bel Air, California.
Beautiful.
And man, that's firstly one of my favorite John Mayer tuned bass lines of all time. And I just want to know, like, the session, the gear, how you came up with this part.
Right.
Like, where do you want to start?
Well, like any session you go in and someone's going to play you a song if you're a rhythm section member. So John assembled me and Aaron Sterling and Chuck Lavelle up in New York at Electric Lady Studios. Okay. And this is like early, so it's probably February of 2011.
Okay.
And Aaron was first coming into the group. I had done a tour or 2 tours with John. So we're just coming in as like, when you're at ease with an artist, then all the good stuff starts to flow out because you're not thinking about, do I have to play something that proves I'm worthy of being there? You just playing to accompany the song. So John had that riff and he just started playing it. All we had was just the B, that B chord, little, dominant thing. He just started playing it. And every time I have an opportunity to play bass, if possible, I try to redo Taxman, Come Together, something in the Paul McCartney, like, is there a way to play a root, a flat 7, a fifth, and kind of twist around those notes?
Yeah.
And lo and behold, that was the first time John played something. I was like, ooh, I can do something. And that's just, like I said, roots and flat 7s. And then everything off of that is just pivot stuff. And then that's a line to me. It's like, okay, you can build off of that. You can kind of, as you can hear in the song, like that just kind of is the engine room that keeps spinning. And then everything you add to it is just percolation, syncopation, rhythmic stuff. It was the first idea I had. It worked. He liked it. And we just started letting the song develop from there.
Wow. And so was this recorded live or did you do it as a overdub?
We did it live as a combo. So just John, Chuck, Aaron, and me. And I think that's the solo that Chuck played there. We re-recorded it a couple times later in April, but we kind of missed the naivete that we had when we first recorded it. But we ran through it a couple times with different endings. Like it wasn't quite the blues that it is now. It was the 1 chord. Then we go to the 4 chord, and he didn't have the turnaround kind of sorted. He was trying the minor 6. He's just trying on different ways to get out of that cadence of 1-4. And then one day he just gave up and was like, it's a blues. I'm just going to play the 5. And suddenly it felt like we weren't fighting uphill to try to make it just loop around, tell a story in 3 simple verses, leave plenty of space to play. And that's when we went back to the first time we discovered that was in February, and it just kind of was magical. We were all live in the room, which meant that there's a little bit of bleed from drums into piano. Chuck tried to re-record a cleaner, more, audiophile version of the solo. But as any improv guy, when you are out of the moment and you're trying to create a new moment, he was just playing different stuff. And it's like John kept returning to ultimately, like, it just felt great. The solo he played, the parts we played, the intensity that Aaron played with. So the original, we probably had played it 10 times by the time that's like start, stop. We finally got the ending right. He didn't have the 3rd verse written. I think he sang that in April, but he sang the first 2 verses in February. So it all kind of came together live, but then anything that was missing just got plugged in and filled in later.
And in John's part, he was singing it, you think that was a scratch, or you think that was actually?
Yeah, he would have redone the vocal and redone the acoustic guitar, but as a rhythm section, bass, drums, and piano, we did the bed. He didn't have he had those lyrics like kind of when I first heard the song Come At Me, it had those first two verses, but without the turnaround, it didn't. It was sort of the 1 and the 4 chord were happening. So I don't remember exactly if he was definitely singing and playing when we ran through it, but he would have been in an ISO room. So he was able to re-record and then overdub the vocal.
And just acoustic guitar from him on that.
Yeah, and that's where, the song came from. When we were done in digging ourselves, like the percolating guitar stuff, the syncopated stuff, the almost Michael Jackson-y, pentatonic stuff, that hadn't been recorded yet. Yeah. So it was just when we felt like we were searching for the song and felt like we unlocked it and had a great tune, was just drums, piano, bass, and acoustic guitar.
Wow. And this bass right here, is this what you used on this song?
This is what I had. I bought it in 2010 to tour with John when Steve Jordan was coming in. And I knew, Steve had told someone he wanted to see a P bass and a SVT because he didn't know me. He's like, whoever's playing bass, P bass, SVT. I went to LA music store. I don't know why I'm blanking. True Tone in Santa Monica. Yep. I saw it online and I went in. It was like, I got to check this out to see if it plays as well as it looks, because it looks to me, it's like, this is my dream, vintage P bass. It did. I had to have it. I bought it. Then I used it on the road, and I knew it had kind of become like, this is the instrument that I'd been searching for, waiting to find, get some flats on it, use it a bit so that it's ready to record. And then John had mentioned using some foam because he wanted to get a little more quicker decay, get a little more Bob Dylan, 60s stuff. He's just chasing a tighter sound, a different sound than he had done on the previous record, which was Battle Studies. Yeah. And so
which you were also on a few songs.
I wasn't on that record, but I toured that record. Okay. So I had done, the first tour I did was at the end of Continuum in 2008. He went in with Steve Pino and did Battle Studies. And then we toured that record with Steve, but me playing bass. Okay. And that's when I started using this bass. Really, having done a full tour with John, my first tour was just the last summer tour of Continuum, which they had been out on the road for like 2 years before I came in. So I had really kind of solidified my position of like, John knows what he can get out of me. Yeah. He likes me. So if he's calling me into the studio, I know I can be myself, bring my gear, not worry about, do I need to rent something? Do I have to try to access a sound that I don't already have? I had this bass, B15, Electric Lady Neve console, and I made sure to ask Chad, John's engineer, afterwards. I was like, hey, what was our signal path? Because people like to know, I like to know. And at that time, I had an Evil Twin DI, so I was running through that. And Chad really loved it, nice tube thing. And then the B15, the Neve, like 1073 console, and no compression. He's like, I don't use it with you because he doesn't need it. And then sonically, he was getting all the rich harmonic stuff he wanted by just having bass, Neve, bass, DI, Neve, and then the amp.
And then just for all the bass player geeks out there, what kind of strings would you use on such an amazing instrument as this?
This is a 61 P bass, and you have to pair it with flat wound strings in my world. So I went to, a friend of mine had introduced me to Labella years before. And so I went right away and got some Labellas because I know those guys and they have never let me down. Put the Labellas on. The one thing that I've changed from when I first put a set of flats on a bass is I use, instead of 45 to 105, which is your normal go to get, you're a beginner on the bass, they're going to set you up with medium strings, 45 to 105. Something about flat wound string tension is so random from different manufacturers. It's so consistent with the round wounds. I could pick up any brand and they feel the same. Every flat wound brand, the tension seems to be so different. So with Labellas, it was perfect. And then Eric at Labellas recommended 43 to 104. Now remember, that's 0.043 to 0.104. So we're talking minute change in diameter, but it just gave a little bit less tension. Mm-hmm. But you still, to me, the tone is the same as a 45 to 105. Yeah. And I was in heaven, and that made it like there's no resistance in playing the labella flats that are that gauge for
Yeah.
me. I've got a lighter touch, so I dig in differently than other people, but the strings fit perfectly on the bass. Tension was perfect. Play it for 10 hours a day and never feel like you're working too hard.
Well, we'll make sure that in the description of the video that we link this exact string and gauge from Labella, and so that if people are interested in trying it out on their P bass or whatever it is they have, they can get the Sean Hurley signature set there.
Yeah, I think it's a pairing that existed long before me.
Sure.
But when you do it and you get it right, you're like, oh,
yeah.
Why did I wait so long to just perfect strings, perfect tension, perfect bass, and the rest of your life is just easy breezy.
And is this the bass that your signature bass was designed around?
Yep. So, and I got it, and it's vintage, and everyone, kind of conventional wisdom was like, don't take a vintage instrument out on the road, except I was working with John, who had like tons of vintage instruments, way more expensive than mine, and they were traveling on the road. So like, great, I'm going to get it and go straight to the road. And then by being on the road with John, I was interfacing with Fender guys, and they were like, hey, this bass is really cool. Let's make a copy of it. Mm-hmm. So first I got a copy that they grabbed a custom shop bass, mimicked this. So I have one that looks exactly like this. But then one day, again, Mike Eldred, who was running the custom shop, invited me down.
Good guy.
And I went there, and they copied all this. They took it all apart. I took pictures of everything because I don't work on my instruments, so I've never taken the neck off, never gotten into the cavity, seen what's underneath. I would never do it on my own, but seeing someone else who I trust do it, it's like, all right, you took it apart. Can you put it back together? They did. It's all great. And then this bass is my Sean Hurley signature bass, which is, they decided, and I thought it was brilliant.
Man, that's
just
beautiful.
Pick whatever color. He's like, give me 3 colors you like. Because I'm not an iconic player. Like Jocko's bass looked exactly like Jocko's bass. I didn't feel like this was necessary. I think the smart people at Fender are like, nobody wants to be Sean Hurley, but maybe they just want to sound really good on an instrument that they know is going to sound really good. So this is my favorite color, charcoal frost, but I've got a white one and a sunburst one too.
And then can you tell us about kind of the differentiator here on the bridge?
Right. So this is, again, in talking, like we're all geeks, so you start talking to somebody, talking to Mike, and I'm also a bit of a, New England sarcastic critic guy. So I'm like, who needs another freaking P bass from a guy they don't even know? But what I found, I was using foam all the time. Jamerson used foam. So many great bass players would use foam to deaden the strings to make the decay shorter. And I said, but of course, no bass that they make comes with it. So you're always buying a crappy piece of foam to put in there. And I said, hey, I'd seen someone had done a mute thing before. And they said, yeah, this guy that works with us, other guys have done it, but one of our workers has put a Jaguar mute, because this is a prototype. Mm-hmm. This is actually straight from a Jaguar. It's called the Fender mute, but you can see the holes here.
Yep.
If you buy my bass from the custom shop now, the holes aren't there, but this would fit on a Jaguar guitar, because in the 60s, people wanted to be able to mute.
Sure.
So I got that. So instead of doing this, and if you want to switch it, and I found a lot with John, and sometimes in a song, you want the mute. And then there's other times, like by the end of the song, you want to take it off because you want a little, as the song grows dynamically, you want to loosen up things, more so live. But I definitely engage this when I'm hearing something vintagey. Yeah. It's just
smart idea.
It's very cool. And then I felt like at least there's some, it's not a gimmick, but there's some other offering to just yet another P bass played by somebody who you may or may not even know or like.
Yeah, well, and you don't have to lose your sponge.
Exactly. I've kept this one. This is my favorite piece of foam. I don't know where it came from, probably from a hard drive that I bought. And then, when they ship it to you, there's padding. And I tried it out. I know people use sponges, but those dry out, so you got to keep them moist, I think. And the idea of water in a bass didn't appeal to me. So this beautiful off pink has been my favorite foam. I've probably had it for 10 years or so.
Wow. Well, I want to get into some other stuff that you've done
Sure.
with John Mayer. So I want to fast forward to the latest album, Sob Rock.
Great.
And you're on quite a few songs on that record. And it should be said that as far as John Mayer is concerned, he's really relied on only 3 bass players in his career. It's been David LaBriere, it's been Pino Palladino, and it's been Sean Hurley.
Small club of us.
It's been a very small club, and you each offer something really unique to the sound, and so I think that on that metric alone, you should be very proud of that.
Yeah, I always sleep easy at night to have worked hard, to have come to LA as somebody who had no contacts, and then to go, hey, I'm one of X number of bass players who even gets to record in LA.
Right.
And you start to add up the list. Like, yeah, I think about it sometimes. Only 3 guys have ever played or toured with John.
Yeah.
That's pretty good company.
Yeah, it's excellent company. And I'm curious, like on Sob Rock, it's a pretty sharp turn from kind of where we came from with being in California and born and raised. Although also I think Don was affiliated with this as well. The song I'm thinking of that I want to dive into first from it is Last Train Home, is kind of the big signature single from the record, and it has a kind of a very Clapton inspired, even in the music video, kind of looks like a Journeyman era, I think Forever Man style.
And that was definitely in the air of like when the sound, when the music was coming out like that, it's like, okay, John, I knew he's like, this video is going to match that moment. I was wearing a trench coat. Like it was definitely like, let's play the role. Let's get into character. Cause the music kind of just, it coaxed that out of the whole vibe.
And he had the soldano and all the stuff that you would expect from that era of Eric Clapton. And so what was the form, like what kind of form was that song in when it got to you?
That was one we had assembled for Sob Rock during COVID. It was the summer, like June, July, probably July, August. We were just going into a studio every day when no one else was really doing much, because this was July of 2020. So there was like, if you would get a test and you didn't have COVID, you could go do things, but still there wasn't much happening. There weren't daily sessions. So the fact that John was like, let's just take this time, we'll camp out. And so he had a bunch of songs he had already kind of prepped, probably in the spring before then. Last Train Home, I don't believe was anywhere in there. And if I remember correctly, it was like, we'd done all the other songs, and then it's like, I've got this other song. And again, not unlike Queen of California, it was just the A section. And even now, like the song is relatively short. It doesn't really have a bridge. There's just an A and a B section, but all we had was the A section. And then he was looking for like, again, let me, there's certain places that you would want to go if you're an artist, like, what's the answer to this A section? Okay. And I know I have it somewhere. I think I brought it. I have my folder I like to take notes of the songs, and I have like 3 different B sections from Last Train Home. It's like, we'd record that, listen back. No, that's not working. Cross that out. We did some other stuff that went out, not diatonic. So maybe some G's and F's and C's in there. Cross that off. And I like keeping record of that because, like, I forget, but I know I wrote it down in the moment. It's like contemporaneous notes.
Yeah, well, maybe if it's okay to show, we can get some B-roll of it, and people can kind of see it cut in.
Totally. With him, he just presented the song, and he just played it on acoustic, and he's like, I just want this to move and not really stop. So he's kind of looking at me because, like, if Aaron's just going to play drums and he'll add percussion, you're the other, like, he's already strumming acoustic. You got to keep it moving. Not, there's other stuff on that record where it's like, a whole note will do the job and it's leaving space for the vocal and other things. But he's like, no, just this needs to be always rolling, because he's like, there's not a lot to the song, so it's got to feel engaging throughout. He didn't want it to have any lulls. So even if we were staying on a chord, I would keep moving around to keep everything moving. And after our first take of that, he's like, do that. Like, he pointed out a thing that I played that transition from the A section to the B section, and it stays on the same chord. He's like, that's perfect. That's what I'm talking about. So make that became a part when, if you're a good session guy, if the guy says that they like something, like, okay, I'm going to do that and use it whenever possible. And if we get tired of it, we'll change it. But that's how parts become created.
And was there a sense at that point that that Greg Gaines would be coming in and then adding in those like keyboard pads?
He had been around because we actually started that year. John had hit me in December, said, I'm going to do some stuff. He was kind of pulling from some unfinished Born and Raised stuff maybe. And he just always has songs that I haven't heard. And he's like, okay, we were putting together material in January and February, even into early March. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I met Greg through John. One of the things we recorded at that time, Greg kicked me out and played synth bass. And I think later then, the song has not come out, but later then I got a chance to either double him or get back in. But it was funny. John had sent a video of Greg saying, this is how you do it. It was classic. It was beautiful. And I was at Henson doing another record with somebody. So I got to see that John and Greg were really hitting it off playing. Yeah. So he wasn't on any of the dates that I was on, but I knew he was going to be around coming in. And John had bought this keyboard and was using it to get those sounds. So he had he's kind of like he showed up and said, hey, Greg, play this keyboard. He'd gotten into it. It was it wasn't a DX7, but like whatever it is.
Or something like that.
It wasn't Overheim, but I'm sure there's a picture of it online. He's probably talked about it. I just remember him he had investigated it. It had certain presets, which is kind of cool to sort of get you started and limit you in the same way. Yeah. And that was kind of what fueled The Last Train Home. But Greg didn't play later. Then I got to do a couple different versions with him. We played it live. We did a slowed down version. Yeah. But I knew, like most of the stuff that I do with every artist, especially John, I'm just framing it up for whatever's going to come next. So whether it's Greg Gaines or John adding layers of guitars, I know you always have to keep that in mind of like, there might be one synth that can become 5 other ones on top, or he may redo the sound if it, whatever's happening, where the onus is on me and the drummer and even John with the acoustic. Like, we have to create the scene that's going to allow all these other things to happen. Yeah. That's why we really have to like measure twice and cut once to get it right tonally as a player. And that's part of the reason I've informed all my choices. Like, what do I do with my bass sound when I'm doing, like, John wanted Last Train Home to be a certain thing. I grabbed my other bass, my 66 with rounds, because I knew they were going to have an easier time completing the job than my flat wound bass. So I didn't play this bass on that song. So if I'm to play it, I got to grab
we'll switch 66. That out in a second. And were you also using the Ampeg B15?
Yeah, I have so many Ampegs now. I mean, I say so many. I got 3 or 4. And I always keep one ready to record. I've even left one in John's world that's a 70s B15 that he just started having around because I don't need 4 B15s at any time. And it made it easier when John would say, hey, can you come in? It's like, great. He already had my B15 ready to go, but it's a 70s one. So it's there's something different about it. It's a little leaning towards an SVT. Even though it's in baby size, form, but the tone's a little different. You can get a little more headroom. It responds differently, but it's still, you throw an RE20 or whatever you're going to mic a B15 with, it's still got a 15-inch cabinet. Yeah. So it's pretty damn similar, especially in the mix.
Well, I'd love to hear you play a little bit of Last Train Home, if you don't mind. We'll do a quick bass change here so we can use the original one.
You got it.
All right.
and scene.
So good. It's so good, man. I love it. And for that sound, it's got a little drive to that. Are there any pedals that you would normally use to get that sort of sound?
No, it's really, this is where it's like, why do I prefer the B15? Because if you just give it a little kiss, it will give you some harmonic interest because the tubes, and I like having the Noble. This is one of the first record I did with John where I was an owner of the Noble, so I was using it, and I found that before the Noble, I would like to use DI and keep it there, and not run through the DI to the amp and just go straight into the amp. I think I maybe had a bad experience with a DI doing something funny, so getting it in front of the amp was like, let me not do that. I had my pedal board built so that one output goes to the amp, one goes straight to the DI. I like the way the Noble sounds in front of the amp, so now I'm doing tube, and depending on how loud I put the volume, that's going to interact with the tube pre of the B15. And with round wound strings that are older, with the tone all the way up, with a 60s P bass, there's already that's where the grit is coming from. And then, of course, on the recording, again, I talked to the guys. Kurt Schneider was engineering into a Neve. He's like, I like to bring out a little 1K because he's a bass player as well. So he's like, I like that, helps the note speak. So I'm giving what I give, and then the control room can give it. It's like, ooh, let's give that. You can hear there's a little more top end, certainly, than there is on Queen of California. And that's, if you keep the tone all the way open and you're going into a tube thing, it's going to have all the harmonic possibilities that your instrument is capable of. And that's the grit I like, or the harmonic interest that you just don't get on a bigger amp that's not working as hard. Like the B15's working, it's like the old guitar amps. They're going to distort at a low volume, and that's, our ears love that stuff.
Yeah, we hear it as warmth or body and stuff like that.
Prior to doing the Noble, I would always use the EBS valve drive, and I find a sweet spot if I want to use it. Like if in the control room they were like, hey, can you give me a little more drive on the amp so that I have a greater distance from the cleanliness of the DI. Can you give me a little more grit? That's when I lean into the valve drive. But on the one with John, the Last Train Home, I was getting what I wanted out of the amp without even having to hit it a little heavier.
What are examples of songs that you would have used the valve drive on of his?
I've probably used it on all of the Born and Raised stuff, because it was back at the time when I was still trying to find, I was using the Evil Twin DI, and the one comment that I would get, which would make me go, I gotta find a way to not have this be a comment, is they would go, the DI and the amp sound almost identical.
Okay.
So the DI was so robust and great and harmonically rich, and because I'm not a distortion guy by nature, the amp, I wasn't hitting the amp much differently. Now, if you're only going to have one signal, it's like the comment would have been, you sound great.
Yeah.
But because it's like, well, what do we want the amp for? A little depth.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have the amp be cleaner than the DI, so the DI's rich. Maybe we should drive the amp more. And so I just took to going, all right, and it was Born and Raised, Paradise Valley. I would always have this pedal board. I would always use the valve drive to give it a little bit, I would always describe it as hitting the B15 a little hard on the input. And then, because it's truly a drive pedal and it's got a tube in it, if I needed to go more extreme, but it became my go-to daily, just a little kiss of grit. So that there's a little bit in there because of a tube, but then the way it, when you hit the front end of the B15 without just your bass, when you're going through a tube before it, you can give it just a little more gas, and your ear just hears, oh, it's a little there's a little like, this guy smokes.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Got it. Yeah. Well, I mean, EBS is kind of, they're kind of one of the OGs in terms of bass pedals.
Yeah, I
even,
discovered it with the octave pedal
Yeah.
back in the late 90s. It was
Yeah.
the best tracking. So
Yeah.
they had been on my radar.
Yeah, and a lot of guitar players too dig like their reverbs and
Right.
choruses are really good and work great on both instruments. And even EBS, they found out that we were doing this interview, and they are actually going to give one of these away to people that are here watching this.
It's a great pedal.
All they need to do, they just need to go to social media, Instagram. They need to follow Sean's page. They need to follow EBS. They need to follow Vertex. Tag a bass playing friend, and that automatically enters you to win. We'll pick a winner 14 days after the video goes live. So a great chance to get one of the newer valve drives. It's slightly different.
Yeah, they got an XLR out in it, which is really cool because, again, if you look at what's on the floor, this is not always the space you want to deal with when you're working. Right. So when they redid it, made it 9-volt power, made life a little easier, but also the XLR out it's nice. I would have enjoyed that when I was younger to go, hey, what would it sound like if I dirtied up my tone a little bit on but still have the control of the DI? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it's a great sound on those records, undoubtedly. And just to kind of bookend this song for Last Train Home. So we didn't get a chance to kind of talk about this bass too much. Can you tell us about this bass? And this is also Labella's on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I always decide when I have a bass, all right, it's going to be round wound or flat wound. So if it's round wound, it's going to get the 45 to 105 Labellas.
Yep.
Because I dig those. I've put these on. God, we did Last Train Home in 2020, and the strings were already on for a couple of years. I'm always hesitant to change them.
Yeah.
Because if I work with a guy and they like it, I don't want to come back 2 months later and have things. So I still haven't changed these. Yeah. They're another 4 years old. They're probably like 8 years old.
Yeah.
If I want brighter strings, I just grab a different bass that has newer strings on it. This has just been my workhorse. 66P bass. I bought it from a guy in Nashville, and I've always intended it to be a round wound thing. So this might be the second set of round wounds I put on this thing, and I've had it for like 15 years. Some guys have that toxic sweat, so the strings die right away. I don't, so it takes a long time.
You lend it. You have a lending library.
Yes.
Sweat toxicity.
Exactly. And it just works in so many genres. If you've got a great P bass with rounds, it tends to be great in pop, country, even R&B. It's like anything, it works with everything. I find the niche P bass with flats, someone has to really be going for vintage in the modern day of the world I'm living in. So I find this thing gets played on like 80% of the things. And again, round wounds, I don't find as much difference in tension, but I prefer nickel-plated steel, not steel. And every brand has all the options, nickel or stainless steel. I like the legato aspect of sliding around. Nickel feel effortless to me, and 45 to 105. Labella has never done me wrong.
Yeah, well, and we'll link both sets of strings, so depending on kind of what your vibe is, you can at least have access to what.
Or just buy another bass and put on the other set.
Or just buy another bass. One last question I have about this song before we complete is, at what point was there ever a point, I should say, that John was like, all right, we're going to make this more of a Clapton feel, or was that just implied based on the arrangement?
Out of the gate, it was this. Like, I think he knew would have told Aaron, I want, you can hear the snare. It's very, he wanted that from the jump. Sometimes you're recording.
He's on to Phil Collins.
Right. It was purposeful. Like, he knows what he's dealing with the ingredients. So he's going, if the drums don't have that smack, and that's not his normal drum, snare drum, a lot of the stuff, it's lower toned or it's smaller, it's drier. He's like, let's get the reverb right before we start recording. Like, let's do it so that the spirit is there. And then it always had that intro. We were kicking it off. He never said Clapton in particular, but like, I'm 50. I lived through that era.
Right.
I watched MTV as a kid. Like, if he had just come in and played those chords for me, maybe I would have put it in a different scene.
Right.
But we had already, this was like the last song we did. Say we were recording for 2 weeks of these other songs. On the Friday of the last thing, like the last thing we did was Last Train Home.
Yeah.
So we already had a scene. It was like, okay, this thing's gonna fit.
Yeah.
I knew it was like, I got to play round wounds.
Yeah.
We're gonna be wearing trench coats. You know, the snare is gonna be popping.
Yeah.
And
I dig it.
we always serve that vibe.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to move to my favorite song on the entire album of Sob Rock, which is Wild Blue. And I want to know everything there is to know about it. Was this the bass that was used?
No, this was not the Wild Blue bass.
Maybe we'll just do a quick switch to the real one, if you don't mind.
I used my Sean Hurley Fender Custom Shop signature bass in Charcoal Frost. I think it's the first time I actually recorded with John and actually used this bass, because I used it a ton live, but I always was using my vintage 61 when I would record a flat wound bass. But because I invested, you got to invest in your instrument. You got to spend some time.
Right.
And my tech said, you know, leave the old one at home, bring this one, like play it, like break it in. And once I started doing that, I started favoring this one over the 61.
Whoa.
And then when we were gathered together to do Sob Rock, it was like, oh, I'd used it live. It took care of the 61 parts. Now it's going to get its, you know, maiden voyage of getting to be put into digital, you know, digital wax and live forever in infamy.
And just to be clear, this is a model that if somebody were so inclined, they could go to the Fender website and they could order a Sean Hurley signature.
If you go to the Fender Custom Shop website, you'll see it on there. Sometimes it's on the first page. There's only so many custom shop basses. So if there's like 9 or 10 on any given release month, it might be on the second page. But it's been there. It's been over 10 years. And I started to see them. Some of the stores are ordering them, but a lot of custom shop stuff, you have to say, hey, I want this, and then you'll have to wait for it to be built.
Right. But you're in kind of a rare group also of people that have signature P basses. It's like you and Pino, you know.
There are not that many. I keep waiting for, it's like it happened through the years where, you know, Roscoe Beck had a bass. So many guys have had basses, and if it's in the custom shop world, they tend to not last that long. If it's a production model, they sometimes last longer, but every year I wake up and go, I pinch myself if it's been another year where it's still available. And then the people, because we're a small community of niche players, anyone that buys one of these tends to hit me up on Instagram, and they're always like, man, it's one of the best basses I've ever had. That's not a credit to me. It's just the builders at the custom shop. But I think if you take a great design and it just, when you put labellas on a P bass with the tension that I like, it fits a lot of other people's
and that's what they put
needs.
They put labels on.
I said that, hey, I had 2 requests. They were not deal breakers, but I said, if we could figure out a muting thing, they came back with this. And I said, please, let's do labellas on it, because it'll feel like the way I'm intending it to feel, and maybe other people will dig it. And they called up Labella and ordered, 50 sets back when they were first starting. And so I think it all goes together, but I've had a lot of friends that are now friends that I've talked to. One guy just looked my phone number up online and called me. He's like, hey man, I just bought one of these basses. Wanted to tell you it was really great. We chatted for like 20 minutes. It's totally cool. I mean, it's a small world. It was, but everybody's been happy. And I've been really happy. And because of that, this has become my number one recording flat wound bass.
Wow. Well, that's quite a testimony for our friends over at Fender. So that's great.
Doing it right.
And so on this song, you used this bass. Were you also using B15 on this?
Yeah, this was, I believe that this was somewhere in the middle of the Sob Rock time. So it wasn't the beginning, wasn't the end. Like Last Train Home was kind of at the end. This was somewhere in the middle. We were just enjoying the process. There was no, you don't have any of the startup achiness, or, you're not getting the dust off anything, but you're not at the end. You're just kind of in the sweet spot. And at this point, it was me, Aaron, Jeff Babco, and John. So Jeff Babco's playing keys, and he was going on roads. And John had kind of set this up like I don't know, maybe we mentioned Dire Straits. Like and maybe that's my own imagination with the chord progression.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
It's even that ride thing. It's like when you come out of the gate and you're just kind of on the ride, it always makes me feel like that mid 80s, Dire Straits stuff. Like it's coasting the whole way.
Yeah.
The band's percolating, the mellowness of the road. So we're just having fun. And again, the arrangement changed as we went on. Like there's a section at the end where that B section part, doubles up. We didn't discover that until maybe the second or third take, but it's such a simple chord progression. We were able to go, let's just set sail and John will guide us through how do we want to transition to the B section? How long does the solo want to be? All that stuff sort of comes together as it's being played by the dudes in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really beautiful bass part though. I think the interesting thing, I mean, obviously hearing it's one thing, but watching you do it, you have such an interesting way to create movement. Even if it's using the same notes, it's like where are you playing them on the neck, and like kind of how do you get into them, how do you transition into them? These things all create this feel that's like uniquely Sean Hurley, and I really appreciate that. I
appreciate that you appreciate it, because this is such subtle stuff, but it's what I live and die with every day. Like, did I play the F here? Did I play the F here? And they make a difference. It's not going to stop the world if I don't do the right thing in the moment. But every time I play, I'm thinking in those terms. And it's funny when someone like you mentions that you're also noticing I've made a choice that affects the greater, the tone of the group, the tone, everything we're doing as a unit tends to. On that note, so later in the song, because I played with Babco a bunch, we would do gigs, especially around the tail end, like getting into COVID and coming out of COVID. We would play, and it would just be more instrumental or grooving. So sometimes we do things to like, hey, only you're going to notice this. Yeah. And I did a little octave thing, which he then answers me with a little octave on the Rhodes. But I was doing it because every once in a while in a session, I don't do slap and pop. I don't do things that are really like, hey, look at me. Yeah. And when I do it, it's kind of like, this one's for you. And I did it. And it fit the song, but it's not something I would have typically done. And I saved it for the fade out. Yeah. But you can hear the keyboard player answer me to like, I was listening to you. It's something you would only get live. Yeah. Like you wouldn't have done it in an overdub world. But I was like, I know he's listening. I'll give him a little.
And so this was all live in the room. John was playing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the exact solo. He definitely did a bulk of it on the floor with us. Yep. But it was this again. I think it was the sweet spot of the time we're doing it in the sessions, but also the time of night. It's like probably 8, 9 p.m. We're like, if we get it, we're gonna get the take. We'll be done for the night, and we're that nighttime vibe post dinner where everyone's really feeling loose and there's no pressure because if you miss it, you can get it the next day. Yeah. But it's certain songs, like they're open to jamming. It's like we didn't know how long it was going to go. We knew we were going to fade out. So like if we catch a wave, the fade out might be extended even longer, which I think we did. It's like we were just having fun. Again, simple tune with 2 sections. So it's all what you do within those sections and how it dynamically grows just a little bit.
It's interesting how he changes the solo too. Like, I don't know if that's something that was part of the thing. Because the first one is very Mark Knopfler. Right. The second one is very John Mayer.
Absolutely. Right. He let it rip. I mean, this is stuff I don't even think he verbalized it, but he's got all the amps set up. I think soloists get this chance to go, hey, I can start here knowing that, he wasn't going to do the reverse. He wouldn't have done the Mayer in the middle and the Knopfler at the end. It's like, that's the perfect transition to like, that's how you do it. That's how you put your stamp on, some music that you're kind of inhabiting and then claiming as your own at the same time.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I'd love to hear you play a little bit of it. If
I will do it. Willing. Simple lines intertwined, but I think that's what it's all about.
boom, boom.
Those are those little things I was telling you about.
Yeah, I don't know that I noticed the subtlety in there, but
they're tiny. I mean, with all the other stuff going on, of course, in the room we're sitting next to my amp, but it's just subtle. Whatever keeps the band moving and engaged, that's what we're all about.
It's a vibe. I get it, man. I love it. Well, when we have Sean's mix for what everybody will hear, they'll get to hear that lifted up a little bit. But man, that's just such, I think it's just such a beautiful part, and just, again, it illustrates kind of what I said to you before, where it's like, there's more than one way you can play these things, but it's kind of like how you're coming into it, how you're coming out of it. It's I think what distinguishes great session players from everybody else is, I think, partially their restraint, but their sensibility as to kind of what to do when, and having that calculation be spot on is so critical important.
I appreciate that. I mean, that's what was told to me sort of in, verbally, but then you read about it, because the assumption was everyone we were listening to on records, they weren't playing at the top of their abilities, right? They're using their taste, their judgment, their restraint to make a song greater than the sum of its parts. And then when you're young and you're first learning to play, the first thing you do is sort of don't do that. Everyone's playing for their individual gratification and aggrandizement. And that's when people usually go, you guys are great, but I don't like your songs, or they can tell that you're a good player, but you're not using your powers for the forces of good.
Yeah.
And then when you get, like I said, I've been drawn to the instruments I'm drawn to because they work for my sensibility, but also everyone is like, oh yeah, if you sound like that, then I want you to do this. Let's do more of that. Let me introduce you to this guy. If I had hit a brick wall, I'd be like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. But when your instincts sort of lead you to more opportunities and successes, you go, okay, I can trust my instincts. And then by trusting your instincts, you can really build, you get this whole community of people that like you to be an integral part of their sonic, their musical life, whether they're young or old, they're like, okay, you fit in, what the deal is. Like when I play with a song where there's a singer, I'm instantly like, the vocal will be always, paid attention to and supported, and figure out what do they need from me. And sometimes it's like, hey, on Last Train Home, I want you to play more, keep it percolating. Where this is like, let's all groove together. My role is the same as a drummer and the keyboards. Like, let's give this thing a little bed.
Yeah.
Because the vocals just, he's singing softly. It's like, we just got to be chill vibes, man. Let's have a good time. On whatever high you're on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's again, it's easier said than done. And creating that sort of internal lookup table for like when you hear this, it's in turn you're going to try these things on that song, or whatever. And developing that vocabulary, I think, is something that can take a lifetime for a lot of us.
I remember the very first time I had the opportunity in a studio in Boston, and the guy liked having me around. We played some gigs, and he's like, if you come to the studio, eventually, I'll be working with a guy who's going to say, hey, can you throw bass on it? And my friend was a guitar player, was 20 years older than me. He was like, when that happens, I'm going to go, hey, Sean, who's been hanging out and adjusting the compressor for us, is a great bass player. And one of those things happened within a month, and it was a ballad, and I was playing whole notes. And then when it got to something and I played a very McCartney something on a C, and everyone loved it. Meanwhile, the whole notes had got me, so beautiful. Oh, that's great. Wonderful. And I was like, okay, this is as simple as I think it is. Like, not that it's simple, like to hit your note consistently and all that stuff and sound good and keep the duration and know what to do. But it was like the building blocks that I'd heard of, roots, thirds, and fifths. They were all as important as I thought they were supposed to be. And it wasn't like I had to play. I didn't have to do something that I was not quite capable of to make a song be its best and have an employer go, you were so good on that. Why don't you play on another song? And it was a ballad. So to get a gig by being a good ballad player, I think was a great start for me to go, okay, I'm not crazy. Bass is bass. It's the same with drums. I think you guitar players and keyboard players, the ask is a longer, it's like, okay, what other layer you got? What else can you add? Blah, blah. But if we do our job right, bass and drums, and our fundamentals are just bulletproof, that can be a fun position to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's a good way to sort of summarize the essence of the bass in that context.
Sure.
And just last thing to bookend this. So that was Noble also driving the front of the B-15.
Yeah, that's all I was doing for Sob Rock. There was one song I can't remember. I know we tried it, and it might have happened where I put a drive pedal even on the DI. We were like, oh, let's just try a DI on this. But everything when we were first like, okay, here's a song, let's go out and play it. Me, Noble, into the B-15, and the sonics of what was the template we were kind of creating for each song I wasn't even reaching to dirty up the amp. It had enough harmonic stuff.
And the Noble's great. He's a local guy to us, San Jose guy.
Yeah, I flew up there and did a demo with him when I first was getting to know the stuff.
And and he's a one-man shop and really making some great stuff. I mean, I think that this is probably in the analog domain has been one of the more disruptive sort of like DI kind of boutique things that are out there. So he's got a lot to be happy about. And then in terms of cables, like I noticed our whole sort of setup today is all one particular cable brand. What do you got there?
Whenever I can, and sometimes I'm doing something short, so I'm using a different cable. But if I'm going to plug in anywhere, I got hip to my friends at Asterope who reached out to me. It was right around Born and Raised, actually. I remember getting my first demo cable in 2010 and 2011. And I just did a little ear test, and they were good for me. So I said, whatever control I have of my cabling, I would try to do it with Asterope. And then I know there's different models. I tend to not be as locked into like, okay, the purple ones for recording and the black ones live, but I've had them now for, some of these are 10 years old and I've used them live. I've used them for many recordings. And because I did that initial ear test, it's like they're, it's like I trust my Labellas, I trust my Asterope because I gave it a shot. Same with the Noble. If you're better than what I'm already using, you're in, and I'll let you know if I have any doubts later. And it's been over 10 years, and it's just, I've got so many, got a bunch at home just ready to go that never leave the house for home recording. These are my Travelers. I put them in the Pelican, and we let it rip. And, I love them. I trust them. I know some other dudes have hit me up because I did a demo for them early on, and it's like, I think cables are the one thing that I was guilty of it. You sort of overlook it because you're not touching it. Strings you're touching, bass you're touching, amp you're hearing. But if you really did the quick ear test, and often the controlled environment doesn't exist, I made sure that I did it. Okay, I walked into a studio, that it was mine. I listened on my signal path through my NS10s, and I said, close your eyes, which do you like better? Instantly changing, and they won for me. And this is where the studio world happens, or maybe even live. It's like, you don't want your stuff to fall apart, or you don't want to have anything to be, hey, is it the cable? There's been times I'm in the studio, all set up, ready to go. And I know it's going to be the pre is dirty, or the compressor's dirty, or the patch bass dirty. But instantly they're like, hey man, make sure your cables are cool because we're hearing a little crackle or something. And I'm like, I just used them yesterday. I know things can die, but it's like, it's not me. And sure enough, they're like, oh yeah, we found it. It's a dirty patch, or it's a bad cable in the studio. So if you can trust it and it sounds good, and I think cables are the last thing, it certainly was for me, the last thing where I put my money where my mouth is. Like, I had to spend a little bit more, but I did the same for the bass. I did the same for the amp. Same for the DI. Like, this is not, you know, I guess it's, you know, cables are affordable, but it's like, it's not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a difference with, like, I won't even go through certain tuners because I can hear my sound just get thin enough.
Yeah.
And so why would I allow a cable to be the cause of that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a case to be made about using high quality cable. And it looks as though you're using, the studio version for coming into the rig. And then you've got the stage version, which is going out to the amp. And my understanding, the difference between the two is just in the connector. The one is gold plated on the one that you have on the bass, and then it's I think it's like nickel or chrome plated that's on the amp side. And I think that there's just a slight kind of timbre difference. But the good people over at Asterope, in order to support what we're doing here, they're offering a free cable so that you can use the very same cable that you use. All you need to do, head over to Instagram, make sure that you're following Sean, make sure that you're following us at Vertex, make sure that you're following Asterope, and tag one of your bass player friends, and that will automatically enter you. 14 days from the day the video is released, we will announce a winner, and that will be shipped directly to you from Asterope. So pretty cool deal. Again, getting you a little bit closer, stacking the deck in your favor so you sound a little closer to Sean Hurley.
No doubt, you'll be me within the blink of an eye.
That's a promise. Yeah.
We guarantee.
Well, I want to move now to something that's quite a diversion from what you did with John Mayer. In this song, you actually were involved in the writing of. And this is a song that my final years of college were just layered with this song on repeat, which is the Robin Thicke song "Lost Without You." I'm really curious about the role that you played in this, and as it turns out, not just on bass, but also on guitar.
Yeah, that's me on the rhythm guitar. I played with my bass player claw grip. I just played those little voicings
on a nylon string.
That was actually on my buddy's Martin guitar, but all the overdub stuff is that guitar player friend I told you in Boston that brought me into the studio and hooked me up. He was my gateway to Robin. He played all the soloistic stuff on a nylon. So that's why it's got that timbre. But the main part that starts the song is me on the producer. His name is Pro J. I've known him for years because when I first met Robin, he was working the stuff, running doing all the engineering, co-writing, producing. He had a Martin, and that we were talking earlier off camera about guitars and older strings. I had one acoustic guitar that when I tried to record with it was not the correct thing that engineers were looking for, but it wasn't a problem because I was not a recording guitarist. But up at Robin's house, Pro J had his Martin there, and it was older. It was probably 90s, but it just would sit out. It got nice and dry and old, and the strings were old, so that when you'd play it, it had that earthy, kind of baked in, like worn in flat wound kind of thing. So it really, I walked in, started playing those chords in front of the fireplace, and they brought out a 414 and mic'd me up out there because it just sounded good where we were. It was like, okay, let's not go into the ISO booth. Let's stay right here.
Is this a dreadnought, or this is like a
dreadnought? Yeah.
It's like a D28 or something.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I mean, it would have been something he bought new from Guitar Center. But there's something, I find this with basses too. If you don't play them all the time and you sit them out and everyone that passes through picks them up, like a studio instrument can have a charm all its own that us players we're keeping it a little too clean. We're doing things, and I think there's a rapid age. It's like neglecting a child. It ages faster.
Has to mature at a faster rate to survive. Yeah.
So it was inviting. It was warm. That plus the 414. It was one of the older AKG. Yeah, and it just, people talk about the ones from maybe the 80s or something, and it was a good combo on the brick. And then they even brought out a broom, and that's the percussion you hear was literally the broom
with the AKG being picked up.
Yeah, he did that as an overdub, but I played, and then they left the mic there, and so he
I assume it was like brushes or something like that.
Robin was retelling the story to someone who covered the song and he was telling it on Instagram. And I remembered it, but it was like a dude hit me up and it was like, dude, the broom story is epic. It's like, right. Because when you're young, I was only like 27, 28 at the time. Robin was 23. We're just winging it, you know? It's like, I didn't know that I'm not supposed to walk in and play chords on a guitar to be the songwriter and blah, blah. It was like, Robin was just like, play me. He literally, I walked in, he's like, play me something. Because we had written a bunch of stuff in the past. We had worked together. He was my first contact in LA. So there was just like, there's no fear of failure because we weren't successful yet. So it's like,
was that his first kind of really big hit?
that was his first hit. Yeah, he had done a record before, which a lot of my friends later said, "Oh, we listened to it." You know, when they're probably a couple years younger than me. Like, "Oh, we used to listen to that all the time," but it was not a commercial success. Then he was assembling the songs for this record. We did "Lost Without You." Kind of workshopped it a little bit with arrangement, but we did all the initial recording in one night. And it was like 2 or 3 years later when he put out that record, and "Lost Without You" was a single, and it was a number one R&B single. I don't know how big it was on other charts, but it was like for 11 weeks it was number one on the R&B chart.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal for him, and it was his breakout single.
Yeah. And so you got the writing cred for the acoustic guitar or the guitar.
Yeah, because when, we were definitely always playing as if we were band collaborators, and I'd spent many years working with Robin. I'd written songs with him. If you walk in and someone says, play me some chords, and you play them chords and they get inspired and they're singing and you're going, okay, does it need a bridge? Does it need a thing? That's writing. It wasn't like I watched the Freddie Washington thing where he wrote a bass line, he wrote a song around it, he presented it to someone. I've never really done that. That's being a songwriter, but I've always been open to the collaborative thing where a guy like Robin is like, if he hears you play a chord at the piano, he might go, what's that? And he'll write a song with you, guiding you. And we've done so much of that where he's like, he'll sing, he'll be inspired, and then he'll go, what else? Where are we going from here? What else you got? Give me a beat section. And to work with artists that honor that and don't just, session guys. It wouldn't happen that way when you're walking in and creating something out of thin air. But there are times when we're in the studio and we're being very creative, but it's still not songwriting. Yeah. But it was nice with Robin. It was always, if you're part of that inspiration, you're a songwriter and you get credit. And if the song is successful, you share in the financial reward.
I hope it was fruitful. Yeah, because it's a really cool part.
Yeah, it was great at the time. It still is great to this day. But a lot of my younger friends will tell me that they've played it a million times in cover bands because it just became a staple that always worked at outdoor patio gigs and this and that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the only challenge is they have to recreate sort of the purity of the falsetto of Robin Thicke, which is in and of itself a hard thing.
I would not take on that challenge ever.
Well, and so that was. And was there any bass on that at all, or was?
Yeah, what we did was, this goes back to the beginning of my career, when we're talking comparing with Wild Blue, which was just a few years ago. I'm a seasoned, capable pro who is unflappable. It's like, well, I walk in, I work with a legendary guitar player, drummer, whatever. I don't get nervous anymore. But back to Robin's thing, like I still was trying out, like, what's a good bass to play on a session? Right. I had recently switched from active. I had an active bass, which was my one bass other than a fretless when I moved to LA. Crazy. And then I had gotten another one of those basses that it was passive, and I had started using that, and it became one of my workhorse basses. It was still a 5-string. Again, this is like 2003, 2004. I was getting flat wound instruments and Epiphone P bass, but I was still finding that this Lakeland 5-string, there were no buzzes. There was nothing that would bite me in the ass later. Mm-hmm. So I was starting to use that as I was starting to do sessions. And that's what I had up when Robin, after it was probably a month, we'd recorded the song. He was building it together. He's like, I guess now's the time to put bass on it. Mm-hmm. And when you play bass, but you've written a song on guitar, it seems like bass is like, it's almost like maybe someone else should play it because I'm just going to do the simplest thing because I already know there's no mystery in the song to me. I know what all the chords are. I know what all the root notes are. I'm not hearing it fresh. So, but, you know, my ego wouldn't let me allow someone else to play on it. But I'm like, okay, let me try. And then we just, with Robin, he's very much like John, very much like a lot of my favorite artists that I've been lucky enough to work with, is they're just on the hunt for what's going to feel good. They don't care if something is easy or cool or tricky for me to play. It's like, if it sounds good, if it feels good. So Lost Without You is a 4-chord sequence. So I immediately start going first chord, second chord, third chord, fourth chord. And Robin, again, we've done this a million times. He's like, that makes it sound too boring. It's too simple. Like, so then we just play it on the first chord, let the second chord go, play it on the third chord. So that's the verse. And then it's like, how much, then it just became like the guitar goes da 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 da. With the bass, when the bass did that, it's like, that feels clunky. All right. So it was a kind of like process of elimination. How little could I play to make the song feel full? Because we got to have some bass in a song to like, if there's not a lot of kick drum in that tune, but anyway, it's like all the more reason to have, you got to have some damn bass. But it was process of elimination. And I think in the song was every rhythmic idea when he's like, okay, that's too clunky. It's like, all right, I got it. How about just these 2 notes? Great. All right. But when it grows, what's it going to be? So it does, you'll hear it in the tune when I play it, but there's ba-da, and then the next phrase is da 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 da. I build the chorus so it's full. Then it's between those 2 sections. Then on the outro, I go back to this other rhythm that I had said it could be this, and I'm going ba da ba da ba da, and that becomes the outro. But when I had done that too soon, it was like, nah, that feels like for the verse that was too clunky for us. Again, this is the simplest, I would say dumbest stuff if I didn't respect myself so much. So it's so simple. It's all root notes. I don't play a note that's not a root note, but it's like, what's the stuff you were talking about? So how long do you hold the note?
But this
how
is
many
like on
do
the
you
job
play?
training though, right here, that you're kind of doing,
absolutely.
right?
And I was young enough to not have done this before, to go, I don't know what it means to let a chord go by and not play it. You know, like 4 chords, but you're only going to play 2 of them.
Right.
That was not something that had come across my wheelhouse before. So, but then again, it's like, do you want to bop to it? Robin and John, everybody I work with is like, but how does it feel? Like the minute we stop caring so much about, but check me out, I'm doing all this stuff and this is really cool and hard and I've been practicing, can't you tell? Get out of that and you play it for a person. If they dig it, they dig it. If they don't care. Yeah, but I had to, because 4 chords, so I had to put a root note on all of them. Nobody cares.
Well, it sounds like too, like with Robin, you guys were kind of in a similar trajectory and sort of like you building, so like you could kind of go through this stuff and you didn't have the pressure of being like, this is a huge artist and I need to know this stuff now. You know?
I had a lot to learn, but so did he. But I had been introduced to him in like 99 and I was struck, like my whole musical career, I was looking to work with people that I thought were awesome. And when you're in your hometown, maybe there's only one other kid in the neighborhood or in the high school that's like, wow, that dude's freaking awesome. But then you just keep going that way. And Robin was a breath of fresh air. With like, I had never worked with a singer who wrote songs that was this talented and this, like, the ideas were coming in. At this point, we had done a lot of recording and spent a lot of time workshopping. It was just before computers were doing everything. So I was actually playing the song for 6 hours before we would record it because we were doing DA88s or Tascam and we had essentially digital tape. So I was going to get 1 track to do it right. So I was learning how to do that. And Robin was the first guy I ever worked with who was like, do that again, but lay it back. And I was like, I think I know what lay it back means, you know? And he was younger than me. Like he's like 4 years younger, but I just knew it's like, that level of talent, John's younger than me too. When someone's very talented and has great ideas, all I want to do is go, let me soak up that and try to be, because they can't play bass as well as I can, but they can direct me to play bass better than I might without their input. You know what I mean? So that's where all this comes from. And then we go through that a few times. Now, when I walk into a room with somebody who is starting their career, I've got 25 years of that input, that interaction. I'm so well trained to like, I can do anything because I've been listening and working with people and collaborating and trying to make something cool be hot. You know, whatever it's got to groove, it's got to be hot, it's got to be sexy, whatever the word is. I've heard that from everybody. It's like, okay, we're all chasing the same thing. It's got to move you, and wherever you were growing up in high school or college, like this thing has to live beyond the control room, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear what you did.
Yeah, again, it's going to be a little underwhelming. It's very simple, but it serves the song. I played my Lakeland.
Yeah, let's switch bases and let's give it a listen.
I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? Tell me how you love me more and how you think I'm sexy, babe. That you don't want nobody else. You don't want this guy, you don't want that guy. You wanna touch yourself when you see me. Tell me how you love my body and how I make you feel, babe. You wanna roll with me, you wanna hold with me, you wanna stay warm and get out of the cold with me. I just love to hear you say it. It makes a man feel good, baby. Tell me you depend on me, I need to hear it. I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? Baby, you're the perfect shape. Baby, you're the perfect way. Treat me like my birthday. I want it this way, I want it that way, I want it. Tell me you don't want me to stop. Tell me it would break your heart that you love me and all my dirty. You wanna roll with me, you wanna hold with me, you wanna make eyes and get Norwegian word with me. I just love to hear you say it. It makes a man feel good, baby. I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? 'Cause you will tell me every morning, ooh, alright, babe. Oh, yeah, oh, baby, oh, darling, alright, right. I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? I'm lost without you, can't help myself. How does it feel to know that I love you, baby? Ooh, yeah, oh, baby, oh, darling, all right, right. Oh, baby, oh, darling, ooh, baby, all right, right.
And that's all she wrote.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I want to move to the way that maybe most of us might have first heard or seen you.
I know what's coming.
Which is in the band Vertical Horizon, the great Matt Scannell.
He's a tone freak.
Which is funny because when I first learned of him, and I was a huge fan of the band. I watched the music video religiously.
Right. Trying to see, was he playing a Tyler in that one?
I don't think he was in Tyler yet. I think he was like on G&L and stuff like that.
Well, I'll tell you the backstory is he already had a Tyler, but we were in the zone of what company could we pair with to get some free gear, and we would have gotten some instruments, and so we would have gotten a free G&L.
But he already had so I was watching. I'll show you something a little later. But I'd watch live performances and stuff like that. That have happened subsequently, and sometimes some of this would be on certain music channels and stuff like that. And he always had really boutique, especially underground stuff for that era, because there wasn't a lot of ways to find stuff like that. He had to be plugged in to the gear deep state to get into some of the stuff that he had.
I met him in 97, 98, and he was schooling me on I didn't know who Michael Thompson or Michael Landau were. And he's he was copying the rig of those guys in the late 90s, which was all message boards and secret societies. There was no way to find it, no pictures really.
He was definitely into it. But the interesting thing is I listened to other Vertical Horizon stuff before that album, and he was definitely more of an acoustic and even some of the voice scenes when you listen to even I guess the beginning of Everything You Want has some acoustic in it. But even on Best I Ever Had, some of the approaches to stuff just sounds like what you would do on an acoustic guitar, but he's using an electric guitar. And so, it's interesting just to kind of see that transition, because I definitely heard more Dave Matthews-y sort of stuff in the earlier stuff, and then it became more this rock thing.
The full story is, if you pan out, you'll see before he was playing acoustic, he was just wanting to be electric guitar, Eddie Van Halen guy, loved Landau's work and Michael Thompson's work. But then it's so what are your opportunities? You're at college. You don't have...
He went to some Ivy League school, right?
He went to Georgetown. Okay. So you pair up with a guy who's got an acoustic gig at a club every Friday. So Matt goes, I don't do that, but I want to play, and I like this guy and his voice, and I want to get, I was in a band called Toxic Sludge or whatever they were, and I want to do something lighter. So he grabs a Takamine, and the two of them set off for the first time ever for Matt as an acoustic duo. And then they met up with another group of guys that were a little ahead of them, this group Jacko Pierce, and they modeled themselves after them, and they were tearing it up and down the East Coast back then. There were clubs to play for independent artists, and you could do 1,000 people if you built up a following. So that's what they did. Cut to, they get noticed, they sell thousands of CDs, RCA gives them a record deal, and Matt's like, all right, I'm not doing an acoustic record, I really want to, this is our shot at the majors. I want to write pop songs that have my electric guitar voice. So for him, while it was the first that people would go, hey, 3 records of acoustic stuff and sort of jam bandy. They even had Carter Beauford play on one of their
because Dave Matthews is from Virginia.
Yeah, right? And the same guy, John Alasia, produced, him and his partner Doug Derryberry produced the live record that Vertical Horizon made. They produced the second record they made that had Carter Beauford. So there were 3 records, 2 studio, 1 live, and then it's there's some Dave Matthews adjacent stuff. RCA is where Dave Matthews is. But Matt always knew, it's if I get a shot, I want to be transitioning into pop song, rock guitar stuff. That's where his childhood was. It's you figure out what, as a songwriter, you kind of go on a journey of discovery, and that's what he was doing. But he was I'm not going to get another shot at a first major label record, so I'm not going to just go back into acoustic guitar land. He's I want to grow. And also now it's 98. It's Matchbox 20 had hit. Third Eye Blind was big. Fuel, all the bands. So it was he was, his voice on the electric guitar was in a sweet spot for like,
Yeah.
you can totally do this. It's post-alternative. Things had gotten a little slicker. So if you wrote a great pop song but had the guitar band kind of outer shell, you could really work. And
Yeah.
it did for us.
Yeah. So how did you get called into the band?
It was exactly what I wrote down on my vision board or my dream board or whatever thing I was writing on to conjure up my path to success. I was living at home in Pittsfield, Mass. I had gone to Berkeley, and then I'd gotten a touring gig with Arlo Guthrie. So I moved back home. And then after a couple of years of that, I was like, what am I doing here? I was getting ancient at 24, still living back in my hometown. So I moved back to Boston, and I wanted to work. So I started playing with some blues bands, but I was 24, 25. So I'm working. When I would run into other young musicians, I would be like, hey, where are the gigs at for money? But also, if there are any indie bands or any pop bands looking for players, like that's what I'd love to do both. I'd love to make money and also not make money by joining an original band, because those were the two options. You either play covers and get paid or play in an original band and, try to get a record deal. Cut to one of the guys I was playing with in the blues scene was like, hey, there's a guy from Worcester, Mass, Matt Scannell. His band just got a record deal and their bass player quit. And it was like, that stuff never happens. I was like, there's no way a guy from Worcester got a record deal, for one, but also there's no way that they got a record deal and then the bass player quits. That's the dumbest thing you could do. But sure enough, that was true. So they were auditioning bass players in the basement of Matt's mom's house. So it feels very small time, but also it's like I worked with one guy who had been dropped by a label. So I had never had a chance to like, what does it mean to be with someone with a record deal? It means we're all going to buy $1 million mansions like next week, right? So I just learned the songs, hightailed it. I had to borrow a bass because I talked to them, set up the audition. They're like, to be in the band, we're using 5-string range. And I was like, I'm totally up for it. I don't have one, but I'll borrow one from my friend Bobby, the Bobby Keys guitar player guy. He had a Fender 5-string. And they also tuned down a half step. So it's like I had to commit to, like, I'm going to learn these songs on this particular instrument, tune down a half step. So when we say E, it's really E flat, the Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan thing. Even David Ryan Harris does that. And then I went in, I was the first guy to audition. And like, we really hit it off. I'm personable. I was more so back then, possibly. And they're super nice. It's like, typically a band is a family. So they lost a family member. It's like, well, whatever didn't fit with him, we want to make sure we pick the right guy. Yeah. So I came in, it's like, oh, you're great. I played great. They liked my gear, even though it wasn't my bass. I'm like, I'll be buying either a Sadowski or a Lakeland. I just got to join the band and make some money. I was figuring out it's when you're young, they understood. They're like, oh yeah, the last bass player we had to loan him money to buy a 5-string. Like nobody had money for the right gear yet. And because I was the first guy, I was like, this is great, but we're going to wait and see everybody and then we'll let you know. So it might have taken a week or so or 2 weeks before it was like, hey, we've seen everybody, and wouldn't you know, their favorite guy was me. So they called me up and asked me to join. And that meant, it's nothing changed overnight, but there were a couple gigs. There was picking a producer, going into the studio. We went to Bearsville where the band recorded, Jeff Buckley recorded. We were finally engaging into the world of, you are on a label, you're working with a producer, and whatever they need you to do, and they're, kind of talking to me directly, like, do whatever they ask. Like the other bass player, when the producer or the A&R guy who was doing some demo work with them, when they asked him to play with a pick, he said it wasn't really his thing. And so that was told to me, like, don't pull that shit, kid. So consequently, Matt had done all these demos and he had just played some simple bass with a pick. So I'm like, I'll do what you have there because it works and that's what you like. And the producer liked it, and we were recording at Bearsville. We carved out all the tracks, we did all this stuff and mixed the record. And then the drummer, Ed Toth, who now plays with the Doobie Brothers and has for like 20 years, he said, this record sounds a little bit something stiff about it. It doesn't seem like us. And he had been in the band for a number of years, played tons of gigs, been with the transition from acoustic to electric. And he was sensing that there wasn't enough hips to it. And so they got a different producer, Mark Ender, brought him in, and we recut a lot of stuff with bass and drums. And one of the things that we recut was Everything You Want. And we did it I agree it sounds a little bit stiff, a little bit lifeless. Let me try my thing as if I had a thing at 25. And that's what became the song, and that was a genuine number one song. Yeah. So that was one of the first if I like it, maybe I'm not so crazy.
I mean, they had a couple number ones, right?
Yeah,
You're a God was also
that was there, and Best I Ever Had, and then a country artist.
I always thought they were like on two different records because there was a lot of space that they did between those singles.
It's because back in the old days, you wrote a single that was a hit to death. And because we were a new band, we put out the record in September of 99. We didn't have a number one hit with Everything You Want until June of 2000. So that was almost a year later. And then it's like, it was a big song in that summer. So then we rode that until we put out the next single. So it was probably a 2-year campaign. Yeah, because we didn't come off the road until September of 2001. Wow. So, but people don't do that anymore. But that's what we were going to every radio station. It was like a campaign to when you are a new band trying to break a single. It's not the same as a big artist coming in and going, hey, everybody, I got a new single. And everyone goes, all right, great. We started, okay, Atlanta is playing your song. All right, there's a guy in Chicago that wants to play it. Let's go up and do that shake and, meet and greet and do all that. Okay, then we got to go. It was forever till we made it to the West Coast. Like, you're campaigning bit by bit. Everything was more regional back then. Yeah. So that's why
a lot of radio stuff.
If you discovered us early, we were around a long time. If you discovered us late, it's like, oh, there's this new band. They've been on the radio for a year.
And were those songs already developed by the time you got into the band?
Yeah, all that stuff, Matt had already demoed. It was part of the reason that they got the green light to make the record. He had demoed them all. This is back when you would demo stuff on a 4-track. So I was hearing You're a God, Everything You Want. Best I Ever Had, I remember him showing to me when we were messing around in a studio doing something else. But everything was basically written, which is why my job was just to come in, be a great team member, which is always easy for me to I'm here to serve. It's like, you need a 4-man roster. I'm man number 4. I know my role. And I'm also a bass player. Come on. It's like, we're here to glue things together. What was needed was the bass. Matt had the demo. He liked it. The producer liked it. The A&R guy liked it. It's not my job to reinvent the wheel. If you ask me for a second opinion, I can give you one, but I don't come in with guns a-blazing going, that's not my vibe, bro.
Did you sing harmonies on there?
On the record, I would have paid to not. And so I didn't have to. But live, I did. And that was one of the, go to the audition. It's like, well, the last guy we had was a great singer. So we incorporated third part harmonies into our band. So you're going to have to do that. And then they proceeded to have me, okay, we're singing this thing and this, you sing this. And I was like, please don't make me do this. But I had always done it as a kid through all the cover bands. I just didn't want to, but they forced me. And then it became a skill. Again, I don't want to, but anytime there's something, it's like I went and filled in for Squeeze for a while. They're known for their harmonies and lots of background vocals. And I was like, I don't want to, but I can. And and then once you do it, it's like, oh, this is awesome. But it's like adding another layer of work to you and finding, it's like, if I'm playing a root note, am I singing a root, a third, a fifth, a sixth? What am I singing? For me, it's not as effortless. But because Vertical Horizon forced me to, I really developed some muscles, and I was able to carry that through every other situation. I've so many times play with an artist, record with them. They want, hey, can you play on TV with us? And I got to learn the background parts because nobody else. I tend to step up first because it's like I've done this before. But it really, if Vertical Horizon and Matt in particular didn't force me to, I would have gladly been like, no, I just play bass. I don't like hearing myself sing, but in Harmony Land, I'm happy. It's like, you got a note missing, give it to me, I'll sing it. Yeah. Just don't solo me.
And so did you end up using a Lakeland for this one?
Yeah, so this was a classic. Again, we're going back in the time machine. I joined the band. At that time, I owned this Fender Precision, but it was an anniversary model, so it had a P and a J and an Ernie Ball Music Man fretless. Both of those instruments I still have today. No 5-string, so I had to go buy a 5-string. Matt lived in New York at the time, and he said, come on down. There were a lot of opportunities to do meetings, and all the A&R and all the label stuff was in New York. So I'd be there often enough coming from Boston. And we went bass shopping, and we went and tried a Sadowski, and we went and tried a Lakeland. And I also had gotten in touch with, I just cold called Dan, who had started the Lakeland bass company, and he offered me 50% off. I pleaded my case, I'm poor and just joined a big up and coming, soon to be huge rock and roll band. And so he's like, I'll give you 50% off. So when I played these instruments, I was like, man, they were both equally great to me, but I had 50% off with the Lakeland, and it really, I got it. The band loved it. The producer loved it. So it was a win. Mm-hmm. And I still have that bass, which has led me to many other Lakelands. But that first one I had was, I bought it in 98. So Bartolini's, it was an active thing. It's not something that's in my arsenal when I leave the house, but I never like to get rid of an instrument that I played a hit song on and had a nice relationship
with.
with.
Eden for the amp, or you DI, or what were
you? For that, this is when we poo-pooed I literally set up, I think at that point, I might have still had something else with pre and solid state power. Whatever I had, I think I worked my way up to the Eden. Not to disparage any of those, but it's like, what ingredients work for you? They didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. But I remember setting them up at Water Music in Hoboken. And it's like, what were they saying in the control room? Like, no, bro. I think it was just DI. I don't remember it was probably a Demeter DI, tube DI. Yeah. I was so ignorant. I didn't even this is where it goes back to the cable thing. Because I had crappy cables, when I'd go into the control room to record, because often we would cut the drums, we'd play together, and then we'd go, all right, now it's time to do bass. Come into the control room. We're going to workshop everything. Then they treated it almost like it's a guitar overdub. Mm-hmm. So I'd go in and the producer or the engineer, someone would hand me better cables than I had. And that's what I thought studio recording was. Cut to when I'm working with Robin, I never brought a cable. It was always like, you have crappy cables here. Studio cables are better. I went to an outside session one time through an engineer of Robin's, and he's like, where's your cables? It was just going to be a DI session. And I think I said to him, it's like, okay, where's my cable? And he's like, dude, you have to bring your own. This is like 2001 or something. When you've had this experience, when you're working with guys that know a million things more than you, they don't always slow down to say, so I show up Eager Beaver in Vertical Horizon. I'm just the band bass player. The producer is hearing the band like, if the drummer's good enough, we're making a record with the band. If the bass player's not good enough, I don't care. I'll get a session guy, or I'll have the guitar player play bass. Yeah. I'm never going to slow down the record. The producers back then, it's like, if the drummer is serviceable, we're good to go. And then I don't have to go outside the band of bringing in members. But they're also like, don't even show me your cable. I got a good cable. Plug into my Demeter. Yeah. Use this tuner that's in the rack here. Yeah. Like, you're young and excited. Simmer down. Let the big boys get you in there. And then if you can play well, you have a shot of sounding good. If they had broken it down for me and been like, your cable is crap, like, your fingers are good, your bass is good, everything from there on out, like, we need to upgrade. But I didn't know. And I was trying to follow in Matt's footsteps. He had the Bradshaw rig and all this stuff. So I was trying to learn it all and get it together. I got a rack tuner and I was trying to keep up. But bass is like, often you can have minimal stuff, minimal skills, and you can still be like, you're the best bass player in the band.
Yeah.
You know, so it took time, and that was one of the learning curves. But the biggest one for me was following directions. Like, hey, songwriter, band leader says, on my demo, I played with a pick, basically half notes. And, you know, there's 2 chords every bar. So just do that. And then you do pedal eighths in the chorus. Mm-hmm. And that was what was happening. It worked for him. Producer okays it. It's only when the second producer comes in and is like, you know, is the song all it can be? Guitars are good. Drums are good. What's missing? Mm-hmm. There's no groove in the bass. And then I said, well, I remember talking to the producer. I was like, well, I just played what was on Matt's demo, but if you threw it at me and said, do your thing, I would do something like this. I was into Michel Indegliocello. I was into, you know, Motown stuff. I listened to What's Going On all the time. I was into Willie Weeks. Mm-hmm. I just didn't have that opportunity to bop in Vertical Horizon because it wasn't, that genre didn't, it hadn't quite opened up. They hadn't quite gotten enough, you know, soul things to come into. Rock was very like, if you didn't swing in rock, you didn't groove, you didn't like, we all loved D'Angelo, but it wasn't like, okay, we're going to do that within this thing. So for me, getting to be a little bit more, because I went right from Vertical Horizon to Robin. Like, we put out our record in 99, June of 99, and in September of 99, I was working with Robin. So I was experiencing all the genres that I really loved. So I was trying to get some of that in Vertical Horizon, and Everything You Want was the big one where, like, when I just was myself and kind of bopped with it in a way that fit that song and that genre, it really solidified my place in, like, okay, we can trust you with the bass chair to like, you're going to make the song better than the songwriter who's envisioning it as a complete piece of work. Yeah. I actually make it better, and that's cool. And then that makes you want to, it's like, well, let's do more together.
Do you mind if we swap it out and let's hear it?
Yeah. Roll it, Mikey.
Got it.
Somewhere there's speaking, it's already coming in. Oh, and it's rising at the back of your mind. You never could get it unless you were fed it. And now you're here and you don't know why. But under skin knees and the skid marks past the places where you used to learn. You howl and listen and wait for the echoes of angels who won't return. He's everything you want, he's everything you need, he's everything inside of you that you wish you could be. He says all the right things at exactly the right time, but he means nothing
thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a great song, man, and it's great to kind of be here, seeing you do it in real time, and certainly the swing aspect. I mean, I think especially in the chorus when you hear like the cymbals coming in, like because that's kind of gridded, and so having some movement in that behind that is.
I felt that, and also for me, maybe other players have an easier time, but I can't groove in the same way with the same little sway with a pick that I can with fingers. But even if I had played the simpler way with fingers, I feel like by the time it hit the eighth notes, it would have been a little more tucked in with the groove. But I think going from, everything was pick to everything is fingers. And now it's like, if you're feeling syncopations, have at it. It's got a bop to it.
Yeah. Well, Sean, there's one more song that I want to talk about with you, and it's I think the most recent of any of the songs that we've talked about with a young, incredible artist, Lizzy McAlpine.
Indeed.
And she's been making a ton of waves with her music. Has got some really beautiful songs.
Yeah.
I was really impressed watching her Tiny Desk. And hearing some of those songs and in the vocal harmonies and just kind of the whole structure of it. And she seems to always have these killer bands and great people playing on
she's got a great community of people that work with her, play with her, make music with her.
Yeah.
I mean, and she's young. She came through Berkeley, immensely talented. So I've only played on one song for her, but it came across my desk via her, a producer that worked with her on her first record, or I think it's technically her second record, but it was the first record I had checked out. But it's of the group of songs that we've been talking about and I've been playing, it's the first song that came to me at home. So I just opened up my laptop, plugged into my Apollo, played it. I had the producer on, he was listening on audio movers. We were talking on the phone, but it's the first song. Like, I have the files. I did it at home. Then I sent them to somebody, and then it's got 500 million streams on Spotify. Where, like, when it's John or Vertical Horizon, like, we recorded in a studio, it went to where it needs to go. This is the first one, and probably a lot of my drummer friends have done this many, many times, but I haven't played on anything that widespread, that loved, when I did it at home, where like my kids were in the other room.
Right.
It was right around Christmas times. It was like 2 days before Christmas. And I'm like, I was going to not work. It's like, well, Phil asked me to do this song, so let me just pop into the office, in and out in 2 hours. And because it's Lizzy, millions of people have.
Did you have any sense of who she was or what she was up to?
Yeah, because a lot of my friends in LA had already been working with her. She'd put out some material. She even had a movie, I think. I had seen her around my friend group, and I was aware that she was writing great music. She was incredibly talented. And so I actually saw Philip Etherington, who produced this song, and we had just worked together a week before he asked me to do this. And I said, because when I meet younger guys, and he's probably over 20 years younger than me, I just tell him, like, don't assume that I'm either too much money or unavailable, because I would rather make music with everybody than be excluded. Because, like, I'm sure we have had these same thoughts. Oh, I'm not going to call famous drummer because I assume they're too much and I assume they're busy. I don't know if that's true, but if I'm ever in front of someone that I like working with, who I think is really talented, same way when I joined Vertical Horizon, it wasn't about the money. It was about the chance to make great music and maybe play on something that millions of people would also enjoy. Yeah. I said that to Phil, like, hey, if you ever got a song that needs some bass, and he would pick up a bass and play on it, just let me know. I'll come running. I'll do it from home. I'll do it in under budget, whatever you need. If you're talented, I want to be part of the team, because there's always a win at the end. It doesn't always have to be money. Rarely does it ever start with money. Often it starts with, like, is this really good? Do you want to be part of it? And then money often comes later, because when you do great things, that attracts more opportunities. So this was a case. Philip was he was mixing it, and he called me on December 23rd and said, I'm mixing the song, and he had played bass on it, and he didn't think it was up to the caliber that it needed to be because everything else in the song was done amazing. There's amazing strings on it, amazing vocals. There's it's stark, it's beautiful. And if the low end was underwhelming in his opinion, it's like he missed an opportunity. So that's why I had to do it like that day. It's like, okay, whatever plans we had on December 23rd, give me 2 hours, let me get on the phone and let me play this tune. And it's super simple. But again, we were on the phone. It was just the choice of like, hey, what octave will we play this D? What will we do? How many eighth notes? How big is the ramp up? Simple stuff, but with a better tone than he had been dealing with. It allowed him to put it exactly where he wanted it in the mix. It fits better with the drums. I get a lot of songs that come to me where someone has demoed a bass with the full intention that they're going to hire someone to beat it. And sometimes you listen, it's like, oh yeah, this is doable. And then I hear it soloed and it's like when you hit a drum and it's not good, but a great drummer hits that snare. It's like, same snare. I could hand this bass to someone else and they'll sound different. And I often, like, the challenge is, could I play that same exact line that you played, but could I make it better, more mixable, so that a producer was like, you made my job so easy. And that was the approach with Philip. He's like, I don't need you to do anything that I didn't do, but I need the tone to be better. And it's just got to be like mix ready.
So is that all in the box stuff then, if it was in Apollo?
Yeah, it's got it for me when I'm at home, because I'm often working for people that don't want to incur the expense of a studio. So budget is very much a concern. I just I think it sounds great. I've turned in my files to some of the biggest producers and they all say, cool. So the Apollo works for me. And I go in with Philip. We didn't even use an amp. Because, again, with a nice tube DI, I've played on tons of pop tunes, hits. They don't need the amp. It's like, it's all what you want. It's like, you can get by with 5 mics on a drum, 7, 8. What if you want to have different mics? It's not a prerequisite. It's not like it's going to be a dud if you don't do an amp.
So there's Noble into the
just
front of the Apollo?
So when I'm at home, I'm just tuner, Noble, UA. I pull up a 1073 plugin. I have a real one, but I've kind of compared them and found very little, like a sliver of difference. But by me using the software, instant recall. And if I ever do tracks for someone and I'm not at home, but I still have my rig, they're going to get the same tone that they've already gotten. And sometimes I put in a LA2A. Sometimes I don't. If I do, but it's a plug-in. I'm kissing it like 2 dB down just for tone. I like the tone of those, but I mean, I've also seen some of the best producers in the world switch over from using the real stuff to often using a combination of both. Some guys have fully switched to in the box if it sounds good. And again, with bass, I think if I have experience with a 1073, the real thing, and then I pull up software and I go, let me just put up a little more 1K. It basically, it does the same thing, And I've peeked over the shoulder of my favorite engineer producers, like the guys that live, Platinum Records all down the hall, and they're using the same plugins that I have on my home rig with Apollo. I'm like, I trust it.
Yeah. And so what bass was it for this?
Funny you should ask. So it was not this bass, although it does feature the low D. So it just by happenstance, long ago I got off the rack a 62 reissue Fender P bass. And for a long time I actually used that as my main round wound P bass. And it sounded great. Even beat out some rental 60s P basses. But because I got a plethora of vintage P basses, my signature thing, this bass has gone, while loved, it went neglected. And then one day I said, what I should do, because I don't have it, is get a 5-string with flat wounds, but I need a P bass sound. And all my 5 strings, it's like back when they were inventing 5 strings for the modern era, very few had the P bass pickup, and the ones that did, I found they just maybe it was the scale length, something. They just didn't have the robust tone I was after. So I've still been on the hunt. I said, let me take, a million people have done it before me. Let me take my 4-string, turn it into a 5-string by just going low B, E, A, D. Let me put flats on. So now I have a flat wound P bass 5-string, but I'm only using the lowest 4 strings. And I've used it on a couple things, but I think one of the first times I recorded with it was for this Lizzy track. And I just put the strings on, kind of worked them in, make them dead. The neck, I've had to have it adjusted a couple times because it didn't, that was not the tension it wanted to see. So it actually kind of, I started getting fret buzz, so it went the other way. But when I first put them on, it was like, oh, this is a sweet spot. And it was a tone I thought that Philip would like, because it's akin to my regular 4-string with flats. And I was right. And we were like, this is going to work in the track. And now all we have to do is carve out the part.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit of it if we could change basses.
Do it. This one will be, you guys can get introspective and think your deepest thoughts until the bass comes in. And then still keep thinking those thoughts.
Just as you did. Just as you did, yeah. Capo.
Exactly, right?
Where do you think is Capo making it? 2 or 3?
You know.
It's Capo in the middle.
Ceilings, plaster. Can't you just make it move faster? Lovely to be sitting here with you. You're kinda cute, but it's raining harder. My shoes are now full of water. Lovely to be rained on with you. It's kinda cute, but it's so short. Then you're driving me home, and I don't wanna leave, but I have to go. You kiss me in your car, and it feels like the start of a movie I've seen before. Bed sheets, no clothes. Touch me like nobody else does. Lovely to just lay here with you. You're kinda cute, and I would say all of this, but I don't wanna ruin the moment. Lovely to sit between comfort and chaos. But it's over, then you're driving me home, and it kinda comes out as I get up to go. You kiss me in your car, and it feels like the start of a movie I've seen before. But it's not real, and you don't exist, and I can't recall the last time I was kissed. It hits me in the car, and it feels like the end of a movie I've seen before.
That's a powerful one. Simple, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean watching it in the context, even the music video, like it's
Right,
it's a really like, yeah.
it kind of it's like the dynamics, everything really ramps up to this crazy crescendo.
Yeah.
And then you jump off a cliff. And
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's crazy that as a songwriter, I'm always so impressed when somebody has like that sensibility at like that age. Like I feel
know,
like I could
right?
barely put one foot in front of the other when I was 25 or
I know it's
whatever Lizzy
shocking
is.
when someone young has it. They know how to say things in a fresh way.
Yeah.
That millions of people react to, and it's like it sounds like a classic when it comes out. I knew when it came to me, I was like, "Oh, this is a great song."
Yeah.
Like, I'm lucky to get to be on it because it's not requiring me to make it anything more than it already is.
Yeah.
I just gotta get there and be part of the team, and then
Yeah.
it's like being the center on the football team. Just give the ball to the quarterback,
Right.
let all the great stuff happen,
Right.
and you guys win, and you get a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hopefully that one's in the mail.
Yep, I got waiting. But these are the ones that's like you get platinum records from. It's like those are. When I was a kid, I thought I'm going to play on 100 platinum records, and you realize the songs that break through that touch lots of people are few and far between. It's like, how many records does even an artist make? Like, again, you join a band, I joined Vertical Horizon. It's like, oh, we have a 7-album deal. We made 2 albums for the label, and then we were kicked off. And it's like, you can keep making records, but nothing is a given or a guarantee. So to be able to play on songs that are by great artists that touch a lot of people, that are part of your musical legacy, and play now my kids are old enough. It's like, listen to this, whether or not it's your thing or not. Like, I did that.
Yeah.
I'm on that. I'm part of the team. I think that's really cool.
It's absolutely cool. Yeah, it's such an honor, Sean, to get to as I like to tell people, I selfishly get to put myself in the position as close as I could be to being in the studio with you when you recorded it, by getting to kind of hear it from your hands. And I absolutely adore the music, and I'm just so appreciative that you'd agree to be here. But before we let you go today, brother, of course, I have one more thing to ask you about that I try to do with everybody, where I show you some photos and videos from days past, and you tell us the context of what it is that's going on there.
It's This Is Your Life. I think that was a show back before our time, but they'd get people on TV and they'd show them pictures from their past. It's like a parade of, this is your life. This is what brought you to this moment.
Well, imagine what kind of fun it would be with social media.
I know. The people today, like a lot of what we did was in the dark and the mystery, and there are no photos. But everybody today, be mindful of what gets photographed. Because I was able to rip up a few questionable ones and throw them away, but
yeah, does not exist.
Exactly.
Could I trouble you for my cellular device? So first photo, young and impressionable Sean Hurley.
I put that on my Instagram wall proudly.
Yeah.
Because that's got to be, I'm 12. I think I got a bass when I was 11, but that's my first bass.
What is the bass?
That's a Hagstrom. What do they call them now? It's not the Swede bass. It's the Greg Kirsten Hagstrom, which he plays. I recently bought a red one like that and a sunburst one like that, because for years, I bought it for $150, or my dad bought it for $150. Then I sold it as I moved on to the next better thing, which was a Peavey. But that was the bass. That's like a medium scale, and that's how I learned to play the bass, was on that instrument. And it has gone from being like a bass that I would, have been embarrassed to have because it's like not pro, to now it is, a lot of the indie people will have them. You'll see them on Reverb for like $1,400.
Wow, that much?
Yep. Because Greg Kirsten, the great producer, songwriter guy, he supposedly always uses that bass. Like he'll use it on an Adele song, whatever.
Wow.
It's got a cool, because Hagstrom made great pickups. Yeah. And I think Guild would even use Hagstrom electronics. So it's got this mid bark to it that if you know, you know.
Yeah.
It's a vibe.
Well, this is kind of a series of photos. There's one
Yep.
here. You got your Gibson's kind of semi-hollow.
Yeah.
Quite a few basses here. You've got it looks like a
Those are my
combination of
trio
signature
of
bass.
P's. Yep.
And you said earlier that you never sell your basses.
Try not to.
How many do you think you might have now?
I've been saying I have about 30 for 10 years, so I could have like 38 because I'll get a few. I'll knock on the Fender door and try to get a couple of the production models just to keep up with what the new P basses are sounding like and share that info with my friends. So I'm somewhere between 32 and 40, I think we're at. And that's probably all the ones that I would actually go, okay, what am I going to record with?
Yeah.
I remember this session was like a 4-day session. I'd worked with this artist before. We were going to explore various things. The drummer had like 5 different drum sets.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring all my, not my good basses, but all my like, this one's got a character. This one's interesting. That one's got a character. And they're all up to snuff. None of them are buzzing. Like they're all recording ready.
Yeah.
So I could whittle it down to just those is my point.
Got it. So there's maybe about 8 to 10 that are kind of like in the main rotation.
Yeah, if somebody calls me and I know who they are and I know what side of the street in my bass world they like, I might bring, 4 flat wound strung things, couple hollow bodies, 1 P bass, and then only one. There's been a ton of sessions like that I've gone on where only one bass has round wounds. And then there's other sessions where it's like, I know it's going to be more the round wound side of the street. There might be a 5-string in there, blah, blah, blah. And then there's like that one was like, I want to have the whole gamut because I had my jazz bass with rounds in there, but also my K, 50s K with flat wounds. So if I'm going to explore the studio space, ultimately 1 or 2 are generally going to win over. Then I'm probably not going to play 8 basses, 1 on each song. But sometimes if the color palette is not yet defined, I want to be the guy that has all the options available.
All right. And this next one is the press release for your signature bass. I know we talked about this a little bit. So this was back in August of 2013. So
11 years ago.
So what was that like for you? Like, do you remember when they told you like it was a certainty that you were going to have a signature bass and kind of?
Yeah, that was a big one because it snuck up on me when I was with Mike Eldred and I went to the custom shop and we were doing all the measurements for my 61. He said, "Hey, let's make a Sean Hurley bass." Because we had previously taken an existing bass and they beat it up to look like it, I thought that was kind of a hurry. We were on the road.
Yeah.
We were off the road at this point. I assumed he meant he was going to take my bass, meticulously measure it, get inside. They look at the output of the pickup and everything. And then I thought then he was going to go, hey, the other one we just did from taking pictures, but this one we really got under the hood. So here's this one. But what he meant was, hey, what we're going to do is make a Sean Hurley model and sell it. So that was a bit, I was like, he can't mean that, right? But then he was like, what 3 colors do you like? I'm like, okay, white, Olympic white, sunburst, and charcoal frost. And I'm like, I think he seriously wants to sell this thing. So then when we were playing, that was December of 2012. So then by April of 2013, I was playing Crossroads Festival in Madison Square Garden. It's the Clapton Festival thing with Mayer. Keith Urban sat in with us. We were doing some of the Born and Raised stuff because that was going to be out that summer. That's when the Fender guys were there because it's a big, guitar world thing. And they brought we were rehearsing, they brought all the basses, the gray, the white, and the sunburst. And I kind of played them all. I think I actually took the neck of maybe the white one and put it on the charcoal frost because it's like they're all handmade. So, it's like they all feel... If you play basses all day long, they all feel a little different. Yeah. So I kind of took this, made it, we determined, now let's take some of the finish off the neck. They're sitting in front of me. I got a picture of it of when they first arrived. And that was in April. So then when they launched it and they're like, okay, if you're happy with them now, that was like the test run.
Yeah.
They're in your hands. If you like them, we're good to go. And we're going to start making them as needed. And then that's when it was like, oh, this is a big deal. It's exciting. Then you look at the page and it's like Geddy Lee model, Pino Palladino model, Sean Hurley model, Jaco Pastorius model. And that's it. It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal. It was like, okay, when they discontinue these next year, I'll still, however long they last, I was like, this is a hoot. This is really fun. And now we're 11 years in. It's like, even if they discontinue them tomorrow, it's like, it's really freaking cool. There's people out there that I communicate with that bought those basses, and it's all because Mike was like, this is cool. We're going to pick your brain on it and then just set them free. And if people like them, they can order them.
Yeah. Awesome.
It's amazing.
I just want to thank you for everything you've done, Sean. I think that, you know, whether you know it or not, you've had a tremendous influence on popular music. You've had a tremendous influence on bass players. And, you know, I think it's just so wonderful that Fender has recognized you in the way that they have, and that you've been featured on so many amazing records that we just get to have a little cross section of that we get to feature here today. So just thank you for everything that you do, Sean. And I'm just so grateful to have you.
And I enjoyed blabbering on endlessly with you.
All right. Well, until next time, we'll see everybody later. All right.
Just mute me halfway through, Ricky. You don't need that.